Welcome everybody. My name is David Eby. I'm a research professor here at UMTRI, and I'm also the director of the Atlas Center. The Atlas Center is a university transportation center that UMTRI runs jointly with the Texas A&M Transportation Institute. And so today's talk is actually a joint talk. It is joint with the Atlas Center Symposium series, which is a series that we run every year, and the UMTRI, this UMTRI's 50th anniversary seminar series. So we're quite fortunate today to have a wonderful speaker, Manser, Dr. Manser, and he is a senior research scientist at TTI, and he's the Human Factors Program Manager. His work focuses on helping drivers drive more safely. This work examines the relationship between drivers and technology and how technology can be configured to address human limitations and strengths. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Mike Manser.
Thank you very much. So a couple notes to preface my presentation today. Thank you very much for inviting me out here. Thank you, Atlas, for making this all happen. I will share some sentiments with Robert later on. Second, this is not a research presentation per se. It's really outlining what the capabilities are at TTI within the automated and connected vehicles domain. And part of that includes our strategy for moving deeper and deeper into this research area. Third, you thought you had a free lunch. Nobody gets a free lunch, according to my dad. You got free food, but now you get to listen to me. So that's your penalty for being here today. TTI's stated mission is saving lives, time and money, or saving lives, time and resources. But we really have three axioms that we really live by. And this is to give you a little bit of overview of TTI as we lead into the discussion of the different research topics. To solve transportation problems through research, we're all interested in doing this. TTI has taken the stance that we're really interested in helping to shape society. We're not interested, well, we are interested in addressing the day-to-day issues within transportation, but we are taking a much longer vision of this and saying, how is transportation going to change society, and how is society going to change transportation? When we think about that in terms of automated and connected vehicles research, it means that we can't just consider AV/CV. We have to look at this bigger role of technology in society and what impact that has. So this is a part of the visioning that we have at TTI is to say, let's look at the bigger picture, even bigger than just simply automated and connected vehicles. To transfer technology and knowledge, this is sort of a stated aim of many research projects for many institutions in the U.S. Excuse me. For us, it's particularly poignant, and a really good example is the Atlas program. There are a series of projects that have been developing different technologies that we hope are going to reach out into society. We also do the bare bones basic stuff, publishing, we have outreach and education programs, things like that, but we're really interested in getting the product that we research out into the hands of engineers or the public or public health people and making it useful. And then to develop a diverse diverse group of people that are going to go out into society to be competent engineers. And that's, again, one of our major goals. I will say that within those goals, we have about 640 people within TTI. So we are a really big, I was going to say animal, maybe that's a little derogatory. We are a beast, we'll say. Trying to meet those three goals can be a bit of a challenge because everybody gets focused in on the day-to-day research and not looking at the bigger picture. When we do look at TTI as an organization, this is roughly how our research dollars are split out. Transportation operations, which is primarily the signing people, they look at how big signs should be, what the background color should be, what the reflectivity should be, what the font size should be. They look at all that stuff. It will also look at the elements on the roadway, so the roadway striping. What should that be like? What's retroreflectivity properties? What are the properties that would best support safe driving, lane keeping, etc. Materials and pavements. TTI has a long-standing history in this area. This is looking at things like how do we make pavements last longer? How do we keep them from cracking? How can we create permeable pavements so when it rains, the water tends to run through the pavement instead of puddling up on top, creating problems there. The program planning, this is headed by Katie Turnbull. This is program development, planning, and deployment. And then we have, I know the people in the back probably can't, so we have safety and human factors. The safety group is very well established at TTI and has been around for decades and decades and decades. That's mainly the crash and bash people at our Riverside campus. These people take perfectly good trucks, they run them into Jersey barriers, and they watch how they flip and turn and do their thing, and then they can make an estimate on whether that Jersey barrier met or did not meet a certain criterion for safety. The human factors part, which is, I know I'm talking to a big human factors group here, behaviorists and everything. The human factors part really accounts for just this little percent sign. We are a relatively small group of people, dedicated nonetheless. It consists of Sue Chrysler and myself. I take care of a lot of the vehicle-based technologies and the development of new safety initiatives. Sue does a lot of work in the transportation operations program right now. That's a huge contrast to Umtree, right? Umtree has this big, very well-respected group of behaviorists, and it's me and Sue over here in human factors, right? But to TTI's credit, we are, a big aim of ours is to get human factors infused into many different corners of TTI. So we're starting to see, certainly in the transportation operations program, we're getting more embedded into those different research projects. In planning, even some of the crash testing stuff, starting to look at maybe how we can use these different crash tests as education and outreach materials, right? So we have these big dramatic tests, and as a researcher, you look at this and you're like, boy, how do you survive something like that? Well, can we begin to use video of old crash tests in order to create outreach programs to increase safety? I will point out we have a series of other smaller programs, and you see them in here. The program I will give credit to is the policy group. The state of Texas funded the development of a policy research center at TTI. They look at transportation policy and they try and inform policymakers as to what's going on with all this research and some other things, so that the policymakers can make better informed decisions. And if you're aware of Texas politics, that is a heavy job, no doubt about it. And they've started out with this very small group of people. Now they're up to about 20, which is a pretty respectable size. But they have had a significant impact on everything else that's going on in TTI. And Ginger Gooden is the researcher who leads that effort. It's been very popular and very healthy for the rest of TTI to really see how our research can inform policy decisions, and vice versa, how these policymakers go through their decision process in, okay, what should this road do, or funding a new highway, or funding some new technology, and getting that information back to the researchers to better help us tailor our research proposals back to the state or whomever. TTI is a big group. We've got offices all over Texas. We have an office in DC. We have an office in United Arab Emirates at Qatar, Mexico City. A lot of those satellite offices have 1 or 2 people, but we have a lot of different places. Within the Center for Transportation Safety, which has Robert Wunderlich, the co-director of the Atlas Center, we do a variety of activities, human-centered, connected and automated vehicles. We do quite a bit of work in motorcycle safety and other high-risk user groups, pedestrians, bicyclists, etc. We have a very strong program called Teens in the Driver's Seat. It's a peer-to-peer sort of support group for teens. They basically develop, the teens can develop their own messages, their own content, their own structure in order to convince other teens that distracted driving is bad and that they basically hang up the phone and stop texting. It's been very, very popular and from some initial evidence has been fairly effective as well. Okay, on to some of the collaboration things. TTI has a whole bunch of facilities at our disposal. We've got test tracks, and we'll talk about those. We have a visibility lab that is run by Paul Carlson. One of the smaller pieces of equipment, although it has a bigger impact, is our driving simulator. I will say, I've been working in driving sims for a long time, in 1994 or so. You guys have a really nice driving sim, and I'm jealous. It's very professionally put together, and you've got all the right bits and pieces, and if you want to, if it's a portable one, feel free to bring it down to Texas A&M. But we do have a portable one. These pictures are a little bit dated. We used to have a desk here. We had gaming controls and gaming pedals, and that's all been shuttled out, and we don't even have pictures of the new system. We now have a regular buck system, which is basically a frame that holds the computers, the monitors, and everything else. We have a real seat, a real car seat for the first time in a long time. We have a real pedal set, and we have real steering controls, so real steering wheel, and it's hooked up to a very high-end torque motor, which gives force feedback. So as we think about automated and connected vehicles research, that force feedback is pretty important because that can start to send signals to the driver that the vehicle's changing lanes or getting into the center of the lane. And I'm also interested in haptic research, using information from the steering wheel to convey certain messages to the driver about the roadway or different conditions or time headways between vehicles, etc. One of the very, very cool things about our sim and your sim is that we both operate on the same software platform. It's Real-Time Technologies Incorporated. We may not have some of the same hardware, but the platform is the same, which is, I think it's absolutely fantastic because now if I develop a scenario and it's built within a world, I can give that scenario and world to you at Umtree, and you can run the same exact experiment up here. There's going to be some tweaking and some tuning, of course, but we now have this equity between our simulators. So as the popularity of multi-site studies increases in the US, that's a significant opportunity between Umtree and TTI, is the sharing of these worlds to run these multi-site studies. Another piece of equipment we have is the Riverside campus. This happens to be a old military Air Force base that was given to Texas A&M University, I think in the 60s, late 50s, 60s. It consists of a taxiway over here, TTI offices. It's about 10 miles away from our main building. TTI has offices here. They do crash testing here, so there's jersey barriers and poles and end treatments and signs and stuff that they break up and bash all the time in this area. We have 2 runways, each is 1.5 miles. TTI basically has control over the center runway, 35C it's called. There are other groups that use the facility, so we have aerospace which uses this. This is an active runway at times. There's police training that occurs and stuff. There's lots of other things. The cool thing is that this very nicely complements what's going on here at Michigan. So we have M-City, which is being developed. That's more of a low-speed test track to test and develop and deploy some of these connected and automated vehicles technologies. But what TTI sees here is more of a high-speed test bed. So we think that that is a nice complement to the development of the M-City. We don't have all the, well, I just preface that by saying we don't have all the money that you guys have. I mean, the state has been, it's been very generous, and it's been phenomenal how they've come together and really indicated the value in developing that facility. The state of Texas has been interested, but not nearly to the extent that Michigan has. So we don't have money to infuse our facility with all the communications technology and all the data collection capabilities and the wireless data transmission and everything else that likely is one of the beautiful things about the M-City facility that's being developed. But we do think with some time we'll be able to develop those capabilities on our Riverside campus. We also have access to Pecos Center for Research and Testing. This is in Pecos, Texas, and if you ever want to go to Pecos, Texas, you basically, well, from here you drive I-35 south to Austin, you go west until the end of the earth, and then you take 10 steps backwards. That will get you to Pecos. It is out in the middle of nowhere, but it is a 9-mile circular track. It's a former tire testing facility by, I can't remember if it's Michelin or Firestone, but they've had vehicles up to 200 miles an hour here. So this is another potential option for us if we're looking at high-speed testing, or if you want to do a platooning type research. For example, if you've got 20 or 30 cars, you want to test them in a fairly safe environment, this is a potential research option for us. It does have its downsides. One, it's in Pecos, Texas, right? It's difficult to get all your research equipment out there at times. It takes a lot more energy to get everything set up. Sometimes you don't forget your cowboy boots because, I mean, Texans wear cowboy boots because of rattlesnakes. Rattlesnakes bite up to about this high. Cowboy boots are, so don't forget your cowboy boots if you go to Pecos, Texas. So.
And your hat.
Yeah. Another facility that we have is, this is the Riverside facility. This is an actual crash and bash test. Chevy truck being run into a Jersey barrier at an angle. It's pretty exciting to watch, and we talked about Riverside a minute ago. But what the guys at Riverside have done is created a virtual proving grounds. So we have the physical proving grounds here. They have developed simulations using finite element analysis of vehicles. So they have these very nice 3D models of vehicles. They have 3D models of all the barriers and stuff that they've been testing for the last 15 years. So they have this rich database that can feed into the parameters of this virtual proving ground. So now they can go in, they can change the parameters of, say, an end treatment. And there's been a lot of news lately about end treatments and companies getting sued and all that about different configurations. Well, TTI can test a whole variety of those configurations virtually before they ever have to build this type of very expensive equipment and run that very expensive test. The really cool thing for me in automated and connected vehicles is that the guys at Riverside have also expanded that simulation to incorporate other types of vehicles, all running at the same time in a virtual proving ground, as well as the communications between vehicles. So when we talk about V2V and V2I and V2X and all that wonderful stuff, they can test some of those communications protocols in this virtual environment. They can look at, for example, delay times in information transmission between vehicles and see what sort of effect that has on collision rates or our ability to respond to these different events. So that in itself is an incredibly powerful tool that has been developed, like I said, about the last 15 years through all of this virtual testing that goes on. Okay, let's talk about automated and connected vehicles research, which is one of the big reasons I'm here. And I want to differentiate between, we often use the term automated vehicle. That really in our mind conjures up this car that drives itself. It doesn't have a steering wheel, it may not have a gas pedal and brake pedal. You get in, you enter your destination, and off and away it goes. Yes, that will be a possibility someday. But really what we're interested in, and TTI is interested in pursuing, is partially and highly automated vehicles, not necessarily the full automation. And we think that the partial and highly automated vehicles are going to be out much sooner than the full shebang. Google, of course, will tell you differently. Okay, Google has a different model. They have their own model. They say, we don't care what the rest of the world is going to do. We're going to go right for the goal line. We're going to do fully automated. You have other companies like Mercedes, not shown here. They're taking a more stepped approach. They're taking one that I appreciate. Let's get the driver used to this next level of technology. Let's add something else next year, and let's go forward in incremental steps so that people can get used to it and understand it and really become accustomed to the technology. So TTI has two different models for thinking about automated and connected vehicles research, and particularly for their strategic direction. This is a very simple, oversimplified diagram, but the key point is that the automated and connected vehicles domains should not be thought about as separate areas of research. The technology itself is going to be blurred between these two areas. You're going to have some communications, which is kind of in the connected vehicles domain, in order to inform perhaps what's going on with an automated vehicle or a highly automated vehicle, and vice versa. So while we do use these terms distinctly in distinctly different ways, TTI's view is that there is a significant overlap. There's a big blur between the technologies that support both. And as a result, our vision of automated connected vehicles is that wider view of what's the role of technology in our society, particularly as it relates to transportation. Okay? We're not so entrenched like solely on this little connected vehicles technology or this highly automated vehicle lane keeping system. Okay? The other important element is that TTI has made it a priority, although human factors is just, I'm 50% of the whole human factors emphasis in TTI, right? They have said this is something that our model cannot live without. We really need to consider that human element as we begin to explore automated and connected vehicles. The second way to look at our approach to automated and connected vehicles is by this model, and the engineers in the audience will recognize this from 30 years ago. It's a very simple systems approach. You have the infrastructure, the vehicle, and instead of the driver, we have a road user, which could be a bicyclist, could be a pedestrian, could be any other type of person interacting. Like I said, the model is pretty simple. It's been around for a long time. The important part is actually these little tiny arrows between there, because that really represents a much more dynamic exchange of information between each of these three entities. Originally, this model did have arrows. Yes, there was a little bit of communications between these three main elements, but TTI sees this as a much more dynamic, much more strong interplay amongst these three elements. If you were to take all the research that TTI has ever done, each project, and plop it onto this map in the area where the work was conducted, and you sort of conceptualize this as a heat map, right? You know, you get 1,000 projects and they're all populated. You would see that infrastructure would be virtually entirely covered. And that's been TTI's strength for decades. You would see a little bit of activity over into the vehicle and a little bit of activity over into road users. The way we look at this in our partnership with Umtree is if you populated all the Umtree projects onto this map, you would see a huge concentration on the vehicle and another significant concentration on road users, particularly drivers. And just by mapping all these projects on, you can see this nice collaboration opportunity between Umtree and TTI. There is a fair amount of separation. Well, there's a little bit of overlap, but for the most part, there's separation. So TTI doesn't think that we're going to be stepping on any of the toes of Umtree when it comes to bidding for contracts. But in fact, we will be good partners because you guys have such strong experience, such respected experience in these two areas that complements what's going on with the infrastructure, that it really does make very good sense to partner up between the two organizations. And TTI is interested in remaining in this infrastructure domain. This is the only slide where it's difficult to read in the back, but we have a lot of experience in highway design, street operations, origin destination type research, travel demand, freight planning, transit safety, pavement performance, etc. And that all still falls within this domain, and that's where we expect to remain for the long term. So this strategic partnership, it's been in conversation for quite a long time, but TTI really, as we go back and we revisit our strategic plan within automated and connected vehicles, it just keeps coming to us and makes us more aware that this relationship really is a smart move on our behalf, and hopefully Umtree thinks of it the same way. So let's talk about a few projects that we have at TTI within the area of this larger domain of technology, but in particular automated and connected vehicles. I have a very small amount of money from the Policy Research Center to look at disruptive technologies, trying to identify what technologies are going to be on the horizon that are really going to change society. I'm working with a person with actual policy experience, that's not me, and they are with me looking at these disruptive technologies, but what they will then do is figure out, okay, if telecommunications really is the next big thing, and it's been moving along and marching along pretty quickly, if that is indeed the next big thing, what do the legislatures need to know about this? So if communications is increasing, you might be able to toll road users in a whole different way. So instead of having the text tag, it's our little sticky tag that goes on the windshield and you get told every time you drive across, and you don't need that. You can rely on your cell phone, right? And it begins to look at the miles that you're putting on your car based on the cell phone traffic. So a mileage-based user fee type model. But now you're using that communications infrastructure to achieve that instead of some other type of infrastructure. So the idea is, what's out there, what's going to hit us, what's going to change society, and how can we prepare legislators to better understand that and be responsive to it, and not responsive in a scared manner. Okay. Deploying automated connected vehicle scenarios and an associated roadmap. This is PI by Joanna Smud. She represents 100% of our Washington, D.C. office. She's looking at deployment scenarios, but particularly as they relate to roadway infrastructure requirements. Again, we're trying to keep our camp well established within the infrastructure domain. Implications of automated vehicle crash scenarios. This is funded by Mo Porsartep, who represents 100% of our Michigan office. We have lots of these little offices, as you can tell. This is actually a fairly small project, $32,000, again, funded through the Policy Research Center, and it's looking at the different types of crash scenarios that may occur with automated and connected vehicles. And again, he wants to inform policymakers about these issues so that they can come up with laws, regulations, whatever needs to be done around that. I think that this $32,000 is about 5 or 6-fold too low for this type of project. Given the potential scare that legislators could have if you have one big crash with an automated or connected vehicle, I mean, we know lawmakers, right? They don't do much in the middle. They do everything on the extremes. Crash happens, maybe it's gory. Legislatures are going to come in and say, well, we can't have this technology, we need to shut it down. That's a potential scenario. Mo's research is going to begin to look at that and say, what are the crash scenarios? How can we mitigate this with lawmakers? And hopefully we can help them make rational decisions instead of emotional, off-the-cuff type of decisions. Legislative research analysis. This is a project Beverly has with Joint Program Office. Data privacy issues, data transfer issues with both AV and CV. Again, it's another project being conducted in the Policy Research Center for TxDOT. Vehicle telematics, this I sort of touched on a few minutes ago. How can we pursue different billing platforms, particularly as it relates to mileage-based user fees? Travel behavior impacts. So we have a very strong travel behavior group. They do a lot of origin destination type studies. One of their main questions is, well, how do drivers change their trip behaviors, their trip planning as a result of the use of an automated vehicle? And this project is digging into that as well. A small project by, again, Mo with Ricardo, North America, looking at truck automation. That is the predecessor to this much larger project being conducted by TxDOT on truck platooning. Okay. Again, it's a demonstration project, lots of partners, it's a fairly complex project. The good thing is that it shows the level of interest by our state DOT in automated vehicles. While they haven't jumped in, head first and given us multi-millions of dollars, they are interested in pursuing this avenue, and they look at it as, can it help us save money or create jobs? That's like the mantra in Texas. And part of this project is beginning to look at that. Where can we save money on freight and other things if we use automated vehicles technology. The Toyota economic loss settlement project, you may remember a few years back the unintended acceleration issues that plagued Toyota. Turns out that there were a few cases of that, but it was there was a lot more publicity than what it really deserved. But as a result, Toyota dedicated I forget how many millions of dollars. John, do you remember? 15 million or something like that? 50 million, yeah. So a huge sum of money dedicated to research on kind of under the rubric of unintended acceleration. We have a small slice of that, just a little over $3 million. We have three main research questions associated with our project. First, can we detect human-based driver errors, potentially within unintended acceleration, but in general? So that might include the driver stepping on the wrong pedal. Maybe they put the car in forward instead of reverse, and they run into the car in front instead of going backwards out of the parking space. So we're trying to detect human-based errors, and one of the technologies we're using is a measure of stress. It's a thermal camera that looks at paranasal perspiration. So your breath that comes out of your nose leaves a small perspiration trace around your lip and stuff. And they can also detect it on the nose now as well. But it turns out that this is really a great indicator for measuring driver stress. And when we correlate it with measures of workload and some other things, it really is a phenomenal measure. So we're using that to detect driver stress, and hopefully the next step is to verify that that increase in driver stress impacts driving performance itself. Perfect. Second question is, can we develop some vehicle-based algorithms or use sensors to detect when the vehicle might make an error? So of course the old person that steps on the gas instead of the brake and runs into the car says, well, that was an unintended acceleration event, it's the vehicle's fault. I didn't do it, it's not human error this time. So we want to detect when that car actually makes an error. Is there something wrong in the code that somehow triggers an unintended acceleration or some other type of vehicle response? We want to take those two different detection techniques, marry them together, and use it to develop a new countermeasure that can be used to address different high-risk vehicle scenarios, like an unintended acceleration or a lane change event or something. So, for automated and connected vehicles, the important part is that third question: can we develop some sort of mechanism within the car itself that can assist the driver when they make a mistake, or assist the vehicle when the vehicle makes a mistake? We got Shan Bao here, who's doing an absolutely wonderful job on that project. I would give you a huge raise if I could. Honestly, it's the work that Shan's been doing is just it's absolutely outstanding. So we're looking forward to the development of this algorithm. Incidentally, this project will single-handedly triple the size of the instrumented vehicle fleet at TTI to 3 vehicles. I know, you guys, again, you put us to shame because you have this fleet out here of stuff like that. So, okay, another platform for doing research, but also a significant research research environment for us to pose research questions is the I-35 corridor, as it's referred to down by us. It really represents an area just below the 35W, 35E split south of Fort Worth and Dallas. It starts in Hillsboro and it basically ends in Jarrell, Texas, just a little bit north of Georgetown. This is about a 100-mile stretch of road that has been under construction seemingly forever. Okay, and the idea was that they wanted to widen it. I think it's 3 lanes in each direction. They wanted to improve the grade and do a bunch of other things. TxDOT is putting a significant amount of money to turn this into a connected vehicles type test bed. So I know that there are some efforts underway here in Michigan to look at a couple different roads and making them connected vehicles friendly. And we're doing something similar here. And I'll give you some examples of the research. Because we do a lot of work in signing and traffic operations, it was natural that we would begin to use some of the communications technology and sensing technology to determine travel times through this corridor. And there are times when people can go through this corridor and they'll go through at a normal speed, a mile a minute. And there are other times, if there's a small crash, you can be backed up for hours. I mean, it normally takes about 3 hours to get to Dallas. It's not uncommon if there's a crash that if you don't go around it, you're stuck there for like 5 hours trying to get to Dallas. It's really it's a terrible thing. But our engineers have developed this Bluetooth detection capabilities. They're portable units that can go along the side of the road throughout that construction zone. It can detect the unique ID of your cell phone if it's turned on, and it can track you. I say you, I don't want to scare you, but it tracks that unique identifier as you move through that construction zone, and it can begin to identify what the travel times are, and then it can inform the changeable message signs upstream, so that as I'm heading toward it, and it says 5 hours to Waco or something, it's like, I'm gonna go to Arkansas and then go to Dallas or something like that, right? Another project that we have is builds on this. It develops a website that can show all of those changeable message signs in real time. So a user, if I'm about to start my trip to Fort Worth from Austin, I can go to this website and I can see, all right, right now there's a delay. I can see where the construction is. I can see where the crossroads are closed. I can see how many lanes are closed in my construction area. And it will begin to show me what the current travel times are. The other beautiful thing, and the important part of this, is that they have been collecting historical data for quite a long time, and they can now predict travel delays based on construction, lane closures, etc., and give that information on the website. So if I'm going to go to Dallas next week, I can see, all right, there's a closure here, there's on the main line, there's some crossroad closures, etc. At this time of day, I'm going to travel at 8 o'clock in the morning. Traditionally, that whole trip would there'd be a 20-minute penalty for my choosing 8 o'clock in the morning. I can then enter in, say, 9 o'clock, and it'll show me the travel time then. And I can begin to look and see how to optimize my travel time. So if I leave at 9, it's going to take me the same amount of time overall as if I left at 8:30 and get that traffic delay. So the ability to take all that information, deliver it to users is unique, and there aren't, if you take a look at the website, if you just type in TTI I-35 real-time map, up will come this map. It's one of the more robust real-time mapping websites that are out there right now. The work zone, like I said, is a rich opportunity for us, particularly as it relates to infrastructure work. I-35 is just If you've ever, has anybody driven down that direction? Okay, well, if you remember, I mean, I-35 is a major north-south corridor. It goes from basically way northern Minnesota down to the Texas-Mexico border. It is clobbered with semi-trucks, and when you're driving down there, it's not unusual to be surrounded by trucks for most of your journey, at least from Dallas down to the border. Trucks don't like congestion, right? It screws up everything for them. They got to be at the terminal by X time, and if they get a delay that they're not anticipating, their pay can get docked or their performance docked, everything else. So one of the applications we're developing is to take that real-time information from the signs and the predictive information and begin to send that to truck drivers in advance of their trip. Right now, we're scheduled to deliver that information through cell phones to make it easy for truck drivers, so they open up an app. There's all that information. It makes it easy for them to get to it, so hopefully they'll use it a lot. And then they can decide, again, just like the Joe average driver like myself, should I wait 20 minutes to delay my trip? If I wait 20 minutes, I can sit and have a cup of coffee, and it's still going to take me, I'll still get there at the same time as I did before. So one of the cool things, in addition to this project, I have some funding through the Atlas Center, and I want to thank Dave and Robert for this funding. It's developing software that resides on a smartphone that collects data off the smartphone-based sensors. So I can mount it on a dash, and it can begin to look at excessive G-forces side to side, stopping, starting G-forces. I collect GPS data so I get an idea of their location. Post hoc, I can compare their speeds, with the speed of the phone, I should say, with the posted speed limit, and I can get an idea of driver behaviors in a very general sense. We are connecting that data collection capability with the ability to provide real-time information to drivers. So we now have a cell phone-based mechanism by which we can deliver connected vehicles information to drivers, but we can also collect data about their behaviors, either the behaviors in the car, stopping, turning, but we can also get route choice behaviors. So if you look at the GPS data and see, you know, when we change this, when we put up a different changeable message sign that says there's a 40-minute delay, what happens to most of the drivers? Do they take a whole different route around it? And is that route consistent with what was presented on the I-35 real-time map website? So it's a powerful tool that we're developing. We think it has lots of utility throughout TTI and hopefully Umtree as well. So there you go.
Any questions?
Yes, sir.
I took you up and looked at your I-35 website.
Ah, good.
Sorry for distracted attention there. But what have you done so far as in the mobile realm? Putting this into mobile access rather than having to go to a full-blown website, JavaScript and all that.
Yeah, this is it's a really good question. I will preface it by saying an engineer built that website. And it's intended to be used primarily through that website portal and not a mobile device, but that's slowly changing. The challenge is TxDOT in that case was a little bit behind the times. They were like, we need a website, we got to do this, and I don't know if the engineer didn't push back enough, but they really do need a mobile platform. We are actually revamping that website now. There's a significant usability study that Sue and I are conducting on the information on that website. If you go to the website, as human behaviorists, you'll look at this and you'll say, why does this menu come up in my face, right? It's a traditional human factors thing, like, why does this thing act so stupid, right? It's got to be different. And we're going in trying to redesign that. There's no solution for that mobile platform just yet, but hopefully that'll come. The bigger opportunity for us in the mobile device area is that integration of the data collection on the cell phone platform, as well as the presentation of information and warnings, which can be just simple things like JPEGs, like small images. It can be a picture of the changeable message sign. It might be a beeper or buzzer indicating you've taken a turn too fast, or you've run a stop sign, or you're exceeding the speed limit. All of that is designed to use the auditory interface first, and then the visual interface is redundant with that to reduce any driver distraction. But that's our biggest opportunity right now in that mobile environment. The project being funded by Atlas, and I think it's an absolutely wonderful project. They were right to fund it. Is developing an older driver support system. So we can go in and have the system collect data on driver behaviors. We can then give them real-time feedback. But what we can also do is program that software to provide either reminders based on geographic location. So if an older driver is approaching a particularly complex intersection, just like the certified driving rehab specialist would do in a rehab setting, we can provide a reminder to them, check your blind spots, or make sure to look left, right, left. And a lot of our feedback is being dictated by what the rehab people typically tell seniors as they're going through their rehab process. We hope that that software can just run on a phone, right on the center stack, and give older drivers lots of rich feedback. Ironically, we were talking with the CDRSs, these are the rehab specialists that deal with seniors most often, and they said, I explained the whole concept to them, and they said, well, why can't we as rehab people use that? Because once they leave our office, we have no idea how they drive. And in fact, when the senior comes in to drive, they're either stressed because their son or daughter is with them saying, my parent drives like dirt, you gotta take their license away and all that. So they're either really nervous, or the senior comes in and they're super vigilant, right? A lot of seniors want to do great on tests to start with, but when you're basically there to determine whether they should keep their license, they're gonna drive as absolutely best as they possibly can, right? When they get home, it might be a completely different story, okay? Hopefully this application that we're developing, again, through the Atlas Center, can identify what types of information can be delivered to them, and then we're also developing the backbone, the software backbone to allow that to happen. So that's like our initial foray into the mobile platforms. Yes?
What are the top barriers for fully autonomous vehicles? Either technology, human factors, infrastructure. What would be the in those spaces?
John, do you want to step out for a minute?
Figure it out pretty soon when the system goes wrong.
Yeah.
Legal policy.
You know, to be honest, I don't know for sure. I haven't looked at the actual factors. I can give you my personal opinion, which is worth as much as a personal opinion is worth, right? For me, there are a couple major issues in the deployment of this technology. One, and probably the biggest, is the cultural hurdle. Okay, technically, we were able to do automated vehicles many years ago, right? And we've been able to communicate messages technically between vehicles and the infrastructure and stuff. The root capability is there, and manufacturers now are like running headlong, and they're developing these systems. Like Mercedes has a really beautiful vision-based system that can detect objects and detect other vehicles, and it's used for lane keeping. But to me, the biggest issue, the biggest hurdle is, in large part, is going to be the drivers themselves. And I agree with the Mercedes approach. Let's take this in a very incremental way. Let drivers get used to one level of automation, steering, lane control, and then let's introduce the next level beyond that and slowly get them into it. The Google approach, and these are the people in the audience who deal with behavior adaptation, how behavior changes over time in both positive and negative ways. This is a huge question that should be posed by them, is how will people respond to that introduction of technology? How quickly can they actually learn the new system before they get introduced to the next system? A project we had when I was at University of Minnesota, we were looking at bus. Minnesota has more bus-only shoulder lanes than all other states combined. The bus is 9 feet wide and the lane is 10 feet wide. So the driver stress is like through the roof, and that doesn't include the mirrors that stick out a foot in each direction. So they're in a deficit, but they're allowed to drive on the shoulder. And in fact, if they don't drive on the shoulder, passengers will call the bus company from the bus and say, this driver's not driving on the shoulder, this is why I took the bus to bypass him. Right? So we developed a system that partially automates the steering task for the driver with the intention to reduce driver stress. And for the most part, drivers liked it, but when they used it, and in post-experiment interviews, invariably they said, we think it's good technology, we like to use it, but we're really worried about the distraction factor here. Like we're still, even after all the training, and that was developed by my group, even after all the training that we conducted, they still would run into moments where they were confused. They thought that the heads, the display that dropped down would be distracting to them. So again, I think a big hurdle is going to be that cultural element to get people through it. This happens to be an example of that picture of that technology. The driver drives along, unwitting bus driver, he gets haptic feedback through the seat. He gets a virtual display, which is a LiDAR sensors detecting all the other vehicles around the bus. They get a heads-up display, shows other obstacles, lane markers, and then they have a haptic steering as well. And the haptic steering can bump them back into the lane itself. And their stress levels drop significantly, but there still were some lingering concerns about how do I deal with this, when do I use it, when do I not use it, and is this thing really going to be a distraction? So.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.